So I wanted to explain this idea of romanticism. I've mentioned this in numerous sections of video, but I just wanted to bring this home again. One literary movement is a reaction to the previous one. There's a general flow of object to subject to object to subject, etc. Although each continent, country, and region can have its own branch or characteristic division from the trunk of this artistic growth, the major flow in the West follows this pattern from the medieval times into the 20th century. I've explained this before, but it goes from object to subject, and not to get into it too much, but it's the idea of, once again, it's the idea of looking at, Romanesque to Gothic, let me see if I can remember this, to Renaissance, to Baroque, to Neoclassic, to Romantic, to realist and naturalism, to avant-garde, and on into the 20th century. And this flow is not complete. There are overlaps. There are things that go on, but you can see that type of pattern happening. And here we've got this happening with the Romanticism. So putting ourselves in the spectrum of Romanticism, and there's a lot of key words in here that I'm going to show you. It's a subjective movement between two objective movements, so it's kind of the sandwich. So we've looked at Enlightenment. After this, we'll look at realism. I'm talking in general across the board, but you could see this in Europe, you could see this in America. Universal characteristics of Romanticism include supremacy of the individual, the importance of feeling, the idea of thought, individual thought, the idea of solitude, affinity to nature and the country. So why is that important? Because when you're in nature, you reflect, and you're not in an urban space, so you're by yourself, and there's not a lot of people around you. This idea of collectivism, you're moving away so you can think and reflect, and personal expression and emotion over collectivism and reason. Remember we saw before with the Enlightenment how collectivism and reason were important? Well, now we're moving away from that. Here's the special one. Ralph Waldo Emerson, major American essayist, lecturer, and poet. He was very important in the beginning of all this idea of Romanticism. Not the only beginning, but establishing a lot of the ideas that were influential to a lot of the writers after. Here's a picture of him. You may recognize the name, you may recognize the picture. Or his influence on a lot of the other writers is also known. And we'll talk about that too. So he went to Harvard and became a Unitarian minister, but he wrestled with Christianity. And this is one of the foundations of Romanticism, is the idea of individual thought. We saw before with in the Enlightenment how people had moved away via deism, and there's an even more, a farther removal from that. We've got, he had a problem here when he was as a minister with religious dogma in general, the idea of dogma and doctrines, things that are set by other people, things that you need to follow, scripts you need to read. So he gave a speech at Harvard Divinity School in 1838 where he brought these points across. This is an excerpt from his Harvard address in which he places individual moral intuition above religious doctrine. So notice this word here, intuition, this idea of intuition. Intuition is something that's intuitive, that's inside of yourself, that makes you think about what is important to you. And, the idea of moral intuition, it's inherently right to do this. This pattern of thought is okay because it's an expression that's individual based on deep reflection and meditation. So here's an excerpt. Check out this. The doctrine of the divine nature being forgotten, a sickness infects and dwarfs the constitution. Once man was all, now he is an appendage, a nuisance. And because the indwelling supreme spirit cannot wholly be got rid of, the doctrine of it suffers this perversion. that the divine nature is attributed to one or two persons and denied to all the rest and denied with fury. The doctrine of inspiration is lost. The base of doctrine of this majority of voices usurps the place of the doctrine of the soul. So, you see that? Doctrine is brought home so many times. So, it's important to look at this. The base of the doctrine of the majority of the voices usurps the place of the doctrine of the soul. So this is the idea of, individual thought is important. This is the idea that working with your own ideas, your own inner self, the romantic self. Oh, I wanted to mention one more thing. We have to think about this adjective romanticism. Today when we say, oh, she's a romantic or he's a romantic person, we connect it to, when you go out with someone, or you're going to have a nice dinner and flowers and all that. It's not that. Romanticism has to do with the literary movement. What we understand as romanticism is indirectly connected to that because it's talking about, a person that's romantic is connected to emotions, is connected to feeling, is connected to thought, and has all of these different ideas that stem from the romantic movement. So that's something to point out, though. So just look at the opposition here in this particular doctrine, or this speech that he gave, and how he uses this word doctrine over and over. So he published Nature in 1836, which became the manifesto of sorts of transcendentalism. We'll talk about transcendentalism in a minute. He also supported women's voting rights and was against slavery, but he didn't participate in group activities to this end, maybe because he didn't really like to be around too many ideas of collectivist thoughts. So it's kind of a self-defeating purpose here maybe, but at least the idea of supporting individual rights was very important to him. The idea of women's voting rights, universal suffrage, and being against slavery. And he gave a lot of lectures, 1,500 lectures. That's a lot. If you break it down and you say, well, if you gave one every day, what would that almost be 5 years every day? And if you spread it out and say, well, maybe every other day, what's that, 10 years? So over the course of a lifetime, even every 4 days he gave one, that's an incredible amount of lectures given. He was a mentor of Henry David Thoreau, and we'll definitely talk about Thoreau a bit later on. His book Walden and a lot of his ideas on civil disobedience are important. And the communication between them is very important also. His basic philosophy was a fusion of God, nature, and the individual. But his idea of God wasn't based on Christian God. It was more of a pantheistic or pandeistic God, as God being, God is everywhere. God is everywhere. God is part of everything. Not really in the sense of this whole, totalitarian idea of a totalitarian God, but rather, God is part of everything. Nature is part of everything, and the connection between this, the idea of spirituality and nature, and seeing God in the development of the natural world was important to him. Connection to thought, connection to the individual, and it was something very much internalized in the idea of spirituality. So a lot of the days, nowadays, some people will say, oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Because a lot of people connect the idea of religion to doctrine and dogma and following a set script of what a particular denomination or religion may have for you. But here the idea of, oh, I'm a spiritual person is because you are connected to something that has to do with that idea of inner reflection and meditation on your relationship between yourself and the universe. So here's an excerpt from his poem entitled Song of Nature. Mine are the night and morning, the pits of air, the gulf of space, the sportive sun, the gibbous moon, the innumerable days. I hid in the solar glory, I am dumb in the pealing song, I rest on the pitch of the torrent, in slumber I am strong. So look at some of these words here, the ideas, mine are night and morning. All right, night and morning cover, what is a day here? the pits of the air, the gulf of space. It covers a lot of distance. No, it's not just talking about a flower or a tree. The supportive sun and the moon, innumerable days. So the idea here of something that's eternal, it's connecting almost, a divine, it's almost divine here, the idea of the divinity in nature. I hid in the solar glory. I'm dumb in the pealing song. Dumb because you're just dumbfounded. I rest on the pitch of the torrent. I slumber. In slumber I am strong. So these, once again, we've got some rhyme schemes in here. It's taken itself beyond the here and now. It's taken beyond and looking at nature as a reflection beyond ourselves into God, into this idea of transcendentalism.